death. All endings are a form of death. And the reason people are petrified, they think of death as a morbid thing, is because we all fear endings. I could ask you guys to teach for the next 10 minutes on that. I could just say any one of you could do it. Talk on this topic. Why are people afraid of death? And most everybody in this room could take it from there for a little while. Tune into it because you're not in control. All those usual reasons we know about death. It's the unknown, right? Leaping into the unknown. Then there's fear. Fear of, did I behave well enough? I mean, if the Christians are right, I'm going to be baking, any minute now. If somebody else is right, I'm going to be coming back. Could I make any arrangements and contracts about who I'll be when I come back? I remember in the 70s, there was a newspaper article about a billionaire or whatever who was offering to pay someone like $1 million if they can prove to him where he's going to come back so he could leave himself his money. I swear to God. I mean, it's ingenuity, I'll give you that, but seriously? So people are afraid of this, but there's other things going on here, guys. Death is also a problem because of any one death represents all other deaths. So it's not just the one we're afraid of, it's all forms of death, all endings. When a person says, I'm afraid to die, you're not just afraid to die, you're afraid of losing your partner too. You're afraid of losing your control too. You're not just afraid of what could happen when you die. We're afraid of what has happened every time we have died. Every time we lost a job, we were terrified just like a death. And it's not helping anyone to remain afraid of death. I have some quotes that I'm going to share with everyone here. Because we have to understand, like one apostle said, I die daily. He didn't mean it literally, obviously, but think about what that means. I die daily. Anybody want to take a stab at what that could mean? Yes.
I'm reborn daily.
I'm reborn daily. Good. Anyone else? Yeah?
Kind of the same thing. I think every moment we're actually new and we can choose again.
Right. I die daily. Yep.
The past is gone.
Good. I die. Now, if I don't die daily, I'm dragging my past into the present, infecting my future, thinking that's immortality. I refuse to die. That's not immortality. What you're doing is you're sabotaging your future based on your unreleased past. So it's actually a good thing to die if you know how. Die daily. Let the past go. Now, do I mean it in the flippant sense? Oh, just let it go. No, I don't mean that. I mean process it to completion. There's a difference. Drop it. Process it to completion. There's a difference. You can never actually just drop it or forget about it. It doesn't work. When something is a neuron in your brain, or a thought in your mind, or a belief in your soul, which are all the same in some respects, you don't just drop it. You can say, well, you can. Surgically, you can have that neuron removed. That part of the brain taken out. It's still in the soul. So you can't have things just drop it, just take it out. It doesn't work. It has to be processed to completion. Process to completion means in some way there will be a processing it out like a goodbye ceremony, a cord cutting ceremony, and so on, so that neuron can be retired. And then the second part of it is, of course, replaced. Where there was some space in my brain, my mind, my beliefs of anger towards somebody that has harmed me, it's weird. It's been replaced with peace and love. And it seems surreal to imagine that we can get to that place, but we absolutely can. And everybody will get to that place at one point or another. We just are better off choosing now versus later. So when it comes to death, you could say death, it's like a physical death, is like the ultimate Groundhog Day, like the movie. You're going to just keep coming back with the same stuff until it's processed to completion, like in the movie. All of a sudden he wakes up and it's no longer the same old. So people they have that whole morbid concept around death. And it does seem weird. It seems like we're dealing with aching, ailing bodies and death and all. Yeah, it has its version of weird, like dark and so forth. But that's not the way spiritual people or spiritual warriors see death. It's almost like the swan song concept. You know, I'm going to read a quote from A Course in Miracles in a sec, but we should and can be able to release our body knowing, woohoo, you know, stepping out of work well done. You should be able to leave going, oh, this is great. Another thing I'm going to be doing. If you say, oh, it's so great, I want to be out of here so badly, you're coming back. If you say, I don't want to let this place go, you're coming back. It's kind of like that. It's kind of simple. Instead, all we need to do is understand, can you release your life and the world and the body and everybody you know? Can you do it with an attitude of work well done? A life well lived. And that's another reason why people are afraid of death. Because subtly they're like, well, I probably could have, eased up a little on this and add a little more of that. So the best way to deal with our fears of death, one of the key things, mind you, if not number one, it's in the top couple, is to know you lived well. I don't mean materially. If you know you've done what you can to make a difference on this planet, you're increasing the likelihood of being at peace when you pass away. Does that make sense? All right. So typically, just a real quick commentary on reincarnation and that sort of thing. Reincarnation, some of us go, isn't life amazing? Because life is like, it's the cycle of life. The way a tree drops a seed, a flower drops a seed, and then it continues. It's just beautiful. And it can be looked at that way. When we pass away, we take our last breath. Oh, poor thing. No, when you took that last breath, you exhaled your last physical breath, and then, and energetically, spiritually, you then took your first spiritual breath on the other side. Does that make sense? You exhaled, but nobody can see that, so they're like, oh, they're gone. Dead, gone, lost, missing, tears, terrible. And that's because of our limited understanding. If we can see it, almost more like good hospice workers. We realize, even if we're just family members, let's say, or friends, we realize we're midwifing people to the other side. Rather than we're losing loved ones, we're midwifing them to the other side. But you're not always in control of when, how, and so forth, when that'll happen. So that upsets us again. Because we don't get to do it our way. That means, again, it's just betraying our own spiritual ignorance. That person exited, took their last breath and out. They took their next breath and it was a spiritual breath. So that's when, poof, they're light, they lit up, they became spirits. They don't usually enter the other side going, oh gosh, I just still wanted to hang out in that bed a little longer. That's not, their thoughts are usually like, like, wow, who would deny a person that? It really doesn't make sense. I know that it still hurts to lose loved one. I get that. But there's the deeper understanding really takes us to another place. However, we think it's wonderful. We pass over, we go to the other side, and there is a beauty to it. But there's a point where you no longer die. There's a point where you no longer reincarnate. Even though we think it's a beautiful, perpetual cycle, it's still not a cycle created by God, if you can believe that. Reincarnation only exists because of another law called karma. Karma only exists because human beings don't remember how to follow only the law of love. So we do things that are sometimes nice, and that's good karma. Sometimes not nice, that are bad karma. But at some point, there's no nice, not nice. There's only being the presence of love. Then you have no karma, then you don't reincarnate. Otherwise, we can dress it up. Oh, they're going to come back again. Oh, it's beautiful. But it really isn't that sweet. Well, you might as well make the best of it, yes. But it really isn't that sweet because it means I chose to not learn something and have to come back. That's why the Buddhist concept of reincarnation, which is typically a misunderstood concept by a lot of people, but that they asked Buddha, what causes reincarnation? And he said, desire. Misinterpreted word, but he said desire. Now you have all these people walking around the earth going, don't have desires. Buddha said it's what makes you come back. He didn't mean desire. I would like a cup of water. I'm desiring a cup of water. Oh, now I got to go back to earth and live on an island. So I have plenty of water to, learn then whatever, right? Or in a desert if I need to get over needing water, Sorry, I forgot we're in a desert. Anyway. So that's not the interpretation that's accurate. What he was saying was our desire to continue learning and healing is what brings us back. Not desires, but that made Buddhism do what other traditions did, which was shame human desire. And that just caused one more sect of people to be all uptight about feelings and desires. It's the desire to learn and heal. So you go, okay, well then that's great. Until the day we realize nothing left to learn or heal. When we become absolute, the love of God, there's nothing left to learn or heal. And that's cool. That's a beautiful thing. No need to reincarnate. Will you still reincarnate? You might. You might say, well, since I got it down so thoroughly, I think I can handle going in and kind of helping some other people. Till you get here, of course. Then you get here and you run the risk of getting caught again in the whole cycle. But, and let me just say something about that real quick. It is true. If you become really clear and you understand love and peace and joy and you bring that to the world, it's possible that you're done here. You pass over and you still will have the chance, the opportunity you're given. Do you want to still go back? And you can say yes. Some people do. Now, when you do run the risk of getting caught again. Even though you're awake and realize how things work because you're on the other side, mostly because you're on the other side. So you kind of go, okay, I get it. And besides, you woke up while you're here. So you have all this awareness. When you come to the earth plane, and one person, the first person that swats you on the butt when you're born or kicks you when you're in high school or middle school, the first person that breaks your heart is going to tempt you to forget that it's all an illusion. And then you're hooked again. However, I'm adding this. Because you were here, out of risking so much, out of the love for humanity, for the love of other people, you do have sort of some special dispensations on your behalf. You do have some, special allowances, in other words. So you might get hooked, but it's not held against us as much by ourselves, as much as when we're just caught up in this world. So if ever you think, God, I think I am one of those, or I would like to be one of those who wakes up, but I'm not going back there because I could risk, you'll be taken care of. When you're a person who gave everything to help others, you're going to be covered. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. It's going to be fine. So some quotes from A Course in Miracles. First, I want to share that A Course in Miracles shares a few negative points about death and a few positive. So I'm just going to share a few quotes from each fairly quickly. Negatively speaking, the Course says, death is the central dream from which all other illusions stem. Isn't it not madness to think of life as being born, aging, losing your vitality, and then dying? He's saying, don't you even question that? We think that's normal. He says, the world teaches that all things are born only to die and is regarded as the way of nature and is not to be questioned because it's natural law and the will of God. But no one asks if it sounds like a loving God. No, it's just natural. Don't question it. Why don't you want to question it? Because you don't know how to get the answers. So just keep sweeping it under the rug. Death is a morbid concept, spiritually speaking. So I'll explain some more. Because it means that something about you is flawed. It means you are a limited human that can die, and you are not. But every time death grabs us, it's like the ego's last stand. No matter how good you can be, you behave and do your pranayamas and eat well and so on, spiritual as heck, and you smile a lot, and you gift people financially, you're told by the ego, you're still going to die. I'm going to get you at some point. And death is its last chance. That's what happens from the Course's perspective. Because what it means is, the only reason the ego can still create death for us, sickness, death, whatever, is because it means we're limited beings. So the fact that the ego can still kill you through illness at the end of your life, our minds are saying it's okay because we believe we're flawed. In other words, if you're unlimited, you can't die, right? So by dying, it seems to prove, that we are indeed limited beings. And that's the ultimate idea the ego wants. I want to prove to you you're not a divine being. And you can fight it, you can resist it, you can process it, you can pray it, you can do all the work we do on earth, and it's still going to get you. So we're going, man, I've lived 1,000 times and I still haven't beat that one last thing, that last game of the ego. No matter how much I do, it still gets me and causes death. That won't be forever. But we need to understand that underneath it, why we're afraid of death and why death exists is because we still believe we're limited beings. Fighting death won't happen by you eating better. The way to deal with death is by recognizing our spiritual origins, and then you cannot die. And that's a day at a time to learn that concept. In this version of the universe, it would be impossible to think of God as a loving God. If you can die, it means, because the wages of sin, according to the Old Testament and the Torah, the wages of sin are death, which means the reason you die is because you have sinned. Another way to say it is, the reason you die is because you are flawed. Which means when Jesus resurrects, he's proving, no, you're not. Do you see what I just said there? He proved that the law of death is a lie. The law of the ego is a lie. He says, for a God who has decreed that all things must pass away, ending in dust and disappointment and despair, can only be feared. This is the ego's way of making us fear God. The Lord taketh away. It's God's will. Why did they die? Well, God's will. Years, lifetimes we've been saying the reason people die is because God does it. And that's subtly the ego's way of making us afraid of God. He holds your little life in his hand by a thread, ready to break it off without regret or care. Perhaps any minute now. That's how the Course is describing, sarcastically I could call it, this idea about God and death. Death is a symbol of the fear of God. His love is blotted out in the very idea which holds it from awareness, like a shield held up to obscure the sun. The grimness of the symbol of death involves worms waiting to greet us. Yet even the worms are doomed to die. Even if we believe that only our body dies and our soul lives on, still affirms something that something can die. Even if you believe, well, the body dies, but the soul lives on, you still think something can die. And if you think anything can die, you haven't totally got a grasp on God, which is endless. Does that make sense? Okay? And this does not proclaim a loving God, nor reestablish any grounds for trusting in God. If death is real, it means life, which is God, can end. If death in any form is real, then it threatens the existence of God. Not really, but in our minds. Last few, no compromise in this is possible. There's either a God of fear or a God of love. The world attempts 1,000 compromises in this and will attempt 1,000 more, but not one of these compromises can be acceptable to God's awakened ones, you and I, because not one is acceptable to God. In other words, it's right for you to question the power of death or the endings, any endings. Your fear that you lost the job, the fear behind it is connected to our ultimate fear in death, because it means if I lost my job, maybe I did something wrong. If someone left me, maybe it's because I'm flawed. If I die, maybe I didn't eat well. Do you see what I'm saying? Everything related to losses and endings and deaths confirms something's wrong with us. So you don't need to just tell somebody, well, get another date and get another job. Then you're trying to hide from confronting this fear. So what we need to do instead is say, if God is with me, what could be against me? The job ended. But that's so that I could see my fears about endings. If I can heal that fear, then I start accessing immortality. The reality of death is firmly rooted in the belief that God's children are limited and mortal bodies, not at all powerful and eternal. A last couple, I said, positive perspectives now, and breathe this in. And the last illusion to be overcome is death. Salvation's final goal will be the end of all illusions. And in death are all illusions born. What can be born of death and still have life? What can be born of God and still have death? God is, and in God all created things must be eternal. Otherwise, God has an opposite, and fear becomes real. Children of God, your one assignment could be stated as follows. Accept no compromise in which death or endings play a part, and of course our fear of such. Be steadfast in this. Be not deceived by the reality of any changing forms, even the rotting away of a tree. Do not be deceived that that thing has power. Truth neither moves, nor wavers, nor sinks down into death. And what is the end of death? Nothing but this, the realization that the children of God are not separate from spirit nor from eternal life. Therefore, death need not be seen as a punishment nor feared, but instead seen as a reward for a lifetime well spent in your learning. Proverbs from the Bible says, you shall walk in your way with hope and your foot shall not stumble. When you lie down, meaning death, when you lie down, you shall not be afraid. Yea, you shall lie down and your sleep will be sweet. We're changing, as I'm talking right now, we're changing the vibe. The Course says, lay down the body in gratitude for a job well done. Now, that means for death. It applies to death, but it also means what I learned from that job, that relationship, instead of it grips me that it destroyed my life, stop and breathe. God cannot die, neither can I. So this relationship ending does not bring me death. This job ending does not bring me terror. This sickness does not confirm my being flawed. Is that making sense? That vibe. Reaffirm it. Switch it around. You know, we came to misunderstand this whole concept of death because when we thought we separated from God, which we didn't, but when we believe, way back at the beginning of time, when we thought we separated from God, we felt like we died a little. Think about this. When you left me, I died a little. That saying? When my loved one passed away, it felt like a part of me died. Trust me, that wasn't the God part, because it cannot die. I mean no offense to our enmeshed attachments to people that thinks we cannot live if living is without them. I'm saying this is the truth. God cannot die. So if something ended, there's people that come to me for counseling on these things. They lost a job. Their whole idea about themselves died. Who am I? Well, you're this. Oh, no. I studied. I went to school. It was everything I knew about myself. Well, that's very sad. Because the more I identify with anything materially, the more it takes me into the grave when it ends. And I cannot die, which means every time I feel wounded by an ending, I am actually self-deluding that I died a little. It means I'm limited enough for something to take me down. Everybody, we stop. We're not being cold to the loss. I'm not saying that at all. Cry the tears if they're there. Hold people that are crying the tears if that's what they need. But resurrect afterwards. Bounce back afterwards. If you want to feel like you're just devastated, lay on your bed, face into your pillow, kick your feet like a wonderful tantrum. No. You can scream and even cuss at God. How dare you take my bicycle away, my car away, my loved one, my partner, whatever it is. How dare you can hate, spew it, and then throw away the pillow. But spew all your thoughts and words into that pillow. You don't have to literally throw it away, but spew it all. God doesn't mind. God has no ego to be threatened by this. The point is, get it out of your system. And cry. And be all devastated. But at some point, go ahead and say, I think I'll have some tea now. And get up and have some tea. And you can say, but I'm not happy about this tea. Just want you to know, I'm still devastated. I just have to rehydrate. And that's fine, because God's holding this smile the whole time. You go ahead and rehydrate then, honey. And you have your tea. But what's going to happen is, when we know the truth that death endings do not exist and do not have power over us, and that in God there is no such thing as an ending, death, powerlessness and all that, the more I identify with God, the less this will control me. And you breathe into that and you allow that. Guys, there's all kinds. There's death of races. When we've seen abuse from one race to another, that's a form of death. And we don't like it. We don't like to think about it. We don't like to talk about it. But the way human beings try to deal with these things isn't going to fix it. Trying to create equality as a legality isn't going to fix it. Because people are going to say, first of all, we've had time when we didn't honor differences. And then we think, you know what we need to do? Let's start honoring differences. Viva la difference. To each his own. That's now honoring differences. It's not there yet. And people wonder why I don't, buy into that a little bit more. Michael, you need to join us. Women as equals. This race and that race, this religion. I don't go there. Because you're still trying to create a polarity without realizing it. We started with no difference, that we didn't honor differences, and we shifted into honoring differences. Humans aren't capable of honoring differences. They're already believing in duality. You can't have honoring differences when you still have duality. What it means is, I'm going to tolerate you more. Practice tolerance. All that means is, even though you're worthless to me, I'm going to pretend I tolerate you. That doesn't work. When people's version, if it doesn't have God, it ain't good. If it isn't God that's inspiring us, because the third step is, there is no difference. Not just treating people like, I don't respect our differences, and then, I respect our differences. There's a point where there's no differences to disrespect or to respect. And that's when we disappear into love. So our version of trying to fix death, fear, processing emotions, or dualities and racism and all this on the world, our version of fixing it, guys, will not work. Go ahead, have your bumper sticker, vote for the right people, do all that stuff. I'm saying, if it doesn't have God, it ain't good. You cannot learn to love the differences without God showing you there are none. You can't practice tolerance. Okay, first of all, I have no tolerance. And then there's, I'm now tolerant. Isn't that great? No, I used to be totally intolerant. Now I've learned to tolerate you. How do you even like that? What about when there's nothing left to tolerate? What if I get to a place where the light in me sees only the light in you? Do you think I would still use the word tolerate after that? Then that's where we need to go. And it cannot be done with our minds that still believe in limitation, death, endings, and so on. It can't happen from human minds. It has to have God inspiring us on those differences. There's a great story, paraphrasing it. Somebody says, hey, what do you think death is like? And there's this one guy, the story varies per person, but this one guy says, he goes to a doctor and he says, doctor, what do you think death is like? Because the doctor's telling him news about his health. What do you think death is like? And the guy says, well, and he's talking to him for a moment, and he hears, because the doctor brings his dog to work, and the dog's in the back room, and he hears the dog kind of scratching on the door and whimpering. So he's trying to explain a little bit about death. And at some point, he finally gets up and he goes and he opens the door. The dog comes running in, right? Excited and all that. He says, I think that people won't need to fear death when they know that, like that dog, it knew of nothing else it wanted to do but rush into the next room to be with its owner, its master. So he's saying, just have the same mindset of a dog trying to be with its teacher, its master. If you know that you have nothing to fear, then you're just going through from one room, through a doorway to another room. Be there and be excited about it. And I've shared the story before, but the most brilliant of all the metaphysical, masterful, great mystics on the planet in history, Jesus included, out of every master I've ever heard, this is the best description of death. This teacher takes a balloon, blows the air into a balloon. And he says, now I'm paraphrasing just slightly, but he says pretty much all this. The balloon is like your body. and your soul is in the balloon. Obviously, there you go. Now that's you. That's you day to day. Shh. The air comes out. The balloon lays dead and limp. That would be your body. The air that came out, where's the air? The people he's talking to says, well, it's all through the room. He said, yes, that's death. Where the air that was limited in a balloon became part of everything. Right? The teacher is? Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers came up with that one. And you see, a mystic is not a person who wears certain clothes or lives only in a cave in the Himalayas. These mystics, these masters, it's anybody who just actually has the ability. I love most those who don't just have the ability to access truth, but to share it in a way that makes sense to other people. That's the ultimate teacher. So in closing, let's allow everything to teach us, even losses, endings, deaths, and so on. Don't be afraid of such. Let's look at why we're afraid of such. And do see the connection of all of them. Every time you lost a prized item, it's a form of a death. I die daily. But did you die well? So you have a choice. You can be crucified to death every day, meaning you're the victim and something's always killing you. Somebody's always taking your power. Somebody always makes you feel lesser and so on. Lose jobs. I lost this. Everybody does this to me. That's not dying well. That's being crucified. The people who die well are willing to, if things do change and end, like a crucifixion, they're willing to say, what is the ultimate lesson in this moment? Oh, I get it. This is showing me I was a little too attached to this or a little afraid of that. It's showing me connections from this to that. Oh, the death of a loved one today is bringing up death of a loved one from 20 years ago that I didn't process fully. I get it. All those epiphanies, those are all called resurrections. Dying well means these things don't have power like they once seemed to. And I die well and I resurrect. What do you think resurrection is? I'm born again. You don't just get born again if you die of the same issues as the last lifetime and you come back. All you are is in a Groundhog Day. That's not dying well. Dying well means I get it and less need to even play around with the laws of the ego. Okay? Is that all making sense? We good? All right. A strange topic, the concept of death. But we don't talk about death. We tie it into everything else. People don't want to talk about death. A couple things people don't like to talk about at parties and interactions. Colon therapy and death. And both are essential for us to understand. Anyway, let's please take a few centering breaths. And as is typical, let's breathe in, relax the body on the exhale. That's a mini death. Because it relaxes the tensions that were there a minute ago. Tension is death. There's the centering or recentering, which means I'm redirecting my focus. Dying of a moment ago's focus and bringing in a new focus. Being born again. Changing with each breath. And as the Course was telling us, one of the proper perspectives of death is to let go of a life well learned, where I learned well. So from this talk alone, what did you learn? Even if you didn't like the talk, or don't like me, you can still actually extract something you learned. And if you don't, then you're dying. Let's learn. What did you hear that was helpful, valuable? And even let Spirit help you find those gems. What did I learn? It could be to not fear death. Yeah, death. Oh no, wait, there was more. All endings. and feel a shift happening in your mind, your heart, your soul, your body. Feel a shift, like an unwinding. My thoughts and old beliefs are unwinding. They're falling away. You can even call it making believe if you have to. Make believe that you do get it and you understand, and that death has no power over you anymore. Let's imagine that we are amazing beings of light that don't need to fear the dark. How could I fear the dark? If I enter a room and it was dark, as soon as I walk in, it's light because I'm light. And the room is a metaphor of thoughts and beliefs. As soon as I walk into a fear, like thoughts about death, my light, my presence that God gave me brightens the room. It's okay. Soak in what you've learned, integrate it, and see yourself standing tall. Like literally feel your body sitting up a little straighter, like a wow factor to it. I really get it. Nothing can be lost. Nothing can be taken away. Even in this world, if something seems lost, I can resurrect it and bring it back with God as my guide. Bring it back into a new manifestation. You can be halfway through a project and it got taken, stolen, destroyed somehow, lost. What a drag, it's so sad. Or we breathe, and instead of having it take us to the grave with it when it got lost, we see it, we release it, and we let it become regenerated, resurrected, or recycled as an even better project. And lastly, let's imagine in our minds that we're lying somewhere. And imagine, just make believe. We fear not death, obviously, so let's imagine we're leaving our bodies, the final, disappearance from the body. Let's see ourselves rising up out of our body and standing there. Back the body up and just float back a little bit, some distance, and be aware, there you are. What thoughts do you have? Review in your mind, do you have any regrets? Be honest. If some pop up, let's just own them. Do you have any regrets? And there are going to be some people, no matter who you are, there are going to be some people, at least one, standing around eventually looking at you, wondering who you were, or if they knew you and their loved ones, they might be mourning. Whoever they are, the people standing around you when you pass away, what advice would you give them? Tune into that. What advice would you give them? Maybe it's okay, guys, I'm all right. So then tell all those people right now, all around the planet, wherever they are, let them know you're fine, even without having died. Just letting you all know, I'm fine. You don't need to attract their sympathy, their tears, their pain. Let's release them. Let's release them from needing to be in pain tomorrow when we go. Let that vision of that room fade and imagine yourself just floating around your home, wherever you live. Just floating around. And ask yourself this. If you passed away, and be patient with this question, are there any things you wouldn't want people to find? I said be patient. Are there any things you'd be ashamed of? Things you've written, things in your computer, secret loves, secret lusts. angers? Are there diaries that spew with anger? It's okay. Let's bring it to the light. Here's the question. Whatever these things are that you might feel a little funny about, people finding, first of all, why? And check this out. If there's a reason you would feel weird about people finding something, it means you're already judging that thing and therefore yourself. Let's learn from that. Nothing has power over me, including my own shames. And then, before we leave that visualization, have you properly allocated things? Leave a will. Let things be taken care of. If you have loved ones or people you'd like to share your thing, with, whatever, money, cars, possessions, jewelry, then do it. Then let's all do that. Let's all make sure we leave a will. So that people you don't even know end up being allowed to confiscate it all. Let's give the stuff. Let's share the stuff. If you have spiritual books and materials, give them to spiritual places or people. Don't let them end up in a burn pile or in a dump. Share. Even after death, see your stuff going to people who are needing it and grateful. Picture it, guys. Picture it. Even after death, people are being affected positively by the things we've left. And as we close that, if there's anything left undone, do it now. Die well. Things are left to the right people. As they call it, my house is in order. Everything's taken care of. I've already written in advance, hey everyone, I know I'm okay. It makes a difference. And it's not just you that needs to say it. They need to hear it for their sake. Shames, well, if you're ashamed of things and you're not able to get past that one question I had, if there's things at home, then get rid of them. Then you don't have to worry about it. Take care of everything, die well, and look forward that on the other side of this death is what? We know, we practice, we teach, there's light. Then why, if you really believe that, then you'd be able to practice that with jobs that died, partnerships that end. If you really believe that on the other side there's golden light and all these beings and angels, then why don't you practice it with other losses on earth? That's how you'll know if you truly believe in a loving God. When all these things end up looking the same, you and I being at peace with their apparent endings because there aren't endings. Quietly center a couple of nice breaths and stretching out gradually.